Hello, friends. Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is U.S. Maritime Modernization, policy-driven changes in ocean shipping with my friend Lauren Beagen. How's it going, Lauren?
Good. Thanks so much for having me on, Joe. This will be so fun.
It's always great to talk to you. I know we could do a 4-hour podcast based on our conversations. So, Lauren, please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
Yes, Lauren Beagen. I am a maritime attorney. I actually have two companies. So I have a law firm. It's called Squall Strategies. And basically what that is, client-based navigation of global shipping. So I work with clients to help them strategize different changes in federal administration, U.S. perspective based, but also we really dive into the Federal Maritime Commission, some of the new things they've been working on. I actually used to work at the Federal Maritime Commission. I was the international affairs attorney over there. I know it well. But yeah, sometimes the company just needs a little extra help with detention, demurrage, claims. But I had at the time some people following me that were truckers saying, hey, I just need you to explain demurrage, but I don't need to hire you as a lawyer. So I actually created a second company called the Maritime Professor. And that's exactly what that is. It's where I work with clients or really anybody, companies, to help bridge those gaps of knowledge, to help get everybody up to speed. It might be new employee onboarding. It might be entire company training, kind of white glove trainings to make sure that everybody knows the difference between the Federal Maritime Commission and the Maritime Administration, MARAD. It's not always so clear, and it's hard to get a good answer anywhere.
It's deliberately murky. We know that.
Maybe. I'm trying to cut through the murk. I'm trying to clear it all up. And so I actually run a podcast myself. It's called By Land and By Sea, an attorney breaking down the weak in supply chain. And that's run through the Maritime Professor. And like I said, it's all about really creating open, accessible supply chain knowledge for everybody. And so there's online courses. Like I said, there's trainings, but sometimes you want that specialized. But what about in my situation? And then that's where the law firm comes in, Squall Strategies.
So when you're talking the law firm, what kind of customers do you have? Are they logistics companies or are they the shippers or?
Yeah, all of the above. I work actually with a lot of associations. And the benefit to working with the associations is it can be commodity-based strategy. So as a certain, maybe it was an ag product commodity might reach out, I can work with them and say, if some of their members collectively have been having a certain pain point in the supply chain, we can start strategizing, okay, how do we overcome that? Who do we talk to? Is that talking to some of the supply chain logistics partners? Is that going to the federal government? Is there something legislatively that we should be watching? So it's that total picture of what's going on global ocean shipping or supply chain wise that I'm in a lot of those conversations where I watch it very closely. And so we can specialize and craft that advice to whatever's happening with that association. But then I often work with members directly too. So it might be the members of the association, or it might even be foreign registered NVOCCs or NVOs or freight forwarders within the United States or shippers who just want a little bit more of I have a lot of goods going through and it keeps getting stuck in demurrage. Can we strategize better ways of making sure this doesn't happen, or just other ways of understanding the regulations? When you play Monopoly, you need to know the rules of the game to play it better, right? And so that's where I help come in. Is I'm an attorney, right? So I know the rules of the game. And sometimes there are nuances that you might be missing that I can help you navigate through and make sure that you're using everything to the best of your ability and to the best of your company's ability, whether that's commodity through the associations or the individual member or company.
Yep. And I don't know if you said it, but you're out in...
Sorry. Yeah, I'm out in Massachusetts. Yeah, originally from Michigan, had quite a bit of time down in D.C., and now I'm up on the south coast of Mass in Cranberry Land, actually.
Very nice. Very nice. I know there's a lot of companies right now that are trying to sort out what's going on. That's why we're going to talk about the policy-driven changes. And we could have also called this policy-driven behavioral changes, that basically the policy is asking businesses to change their behavior. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Some career highlights before you became the Maritime Professor and the curator of Squall Strategies.
Yeah, well, thank you. As a fellow Michigander, proud Michigander, although we are Midwest Catholic, so we were always fans of Notre Dame, of the Michigan State rivalry.
I grew up a Michigan fan and also Notre Dame fan, which a lot of both the Notre Dame fans and Michigan fans will tell you can't be both.
Right. Yeah.
My dad was. So.
Yeah. Of the two, I would have to fall Michigan State only because they tend to be the farm kids. And I can relate to the farm kids being from Traverse City. But yeah, so I'm from Traverse City, which is a lovely resort town now, but it's the cherry capital of the world, actually. Tart cherries. 75% of the world's tart cherries come from Traverse City, Michigan. And they have a lovely cherry festival every summer. It's a fantastic place to be from.
And they got lots of wineries now too.
They're calling it Napa of the 70s, which maybe it is. I don't know. But they're getting better. The wines are getting really
I'm
good.
going to a wedding, another wedding up there. All the weddings in Michigan seem to be in Traverse City.
They are. I think we're becoming, it was cherry.
And every bachelorette parties.
Every bachelor. Nashville and Traverse City. I think every wedding is Traverse City. It's wineries and weddings, I think, is the new commodity of Traverse City.
It's a great area.
It is. But yeah, so then I went to Hope College, which is a small liberal arts college, West Michigan. So by Grand Rapids, it's in Holland, Michigan.
That's a really good school. That's arguably one of the top schools in Michigan.
Oh, thank you. It's actually there. It was on a list. I think it's been on a list for many years.
I'll forgive them for being on the list, because usually if you're on the list, it means your school is.
But the list is top. But you have to listen to what the list is. The list is top 10 schools that will change your life. So it's not on one of those like hoity-toity lists. It's on top 10 schools that'll change your life. It was a fantastic place to go to school.
That's in Holland, right?
Holland, yep. Holland, Michigan. Yep. They have the last windmill that came over from the Netherlands came to Holland. And I don't know if that's actually true. Now that I'm saying it out loud, I've never verified it, but that's what they say. So I'll take them at their word. But yeah, it was. So I went for international political science and international studies, minored in almost French and almost German. I think I had a class for both, and I wasn't going to stick around to finish those.
And you were the president there. I remember you telling me that one time.
Of the Student Congress, yep. So the mascot, that was my big contribution. The mascot Dutch is something that we created while I was the president of Student Congress.
Yeah, and it's still a lot of blonde-haired, blue-eyed Dutch people living there. It's a very successful area of Michigan.
Yeah, but I joined the sailing team, which was fantastic, but also terrible, mostly because I found myself trying to go sailing instead of going to classes anymore, but really tapped into my passion of sailing. Ended up working for a party catamaran out of Traverse City in the summers, and got my 50-ton captain's license when I was finishing school. And I had found this law school out in the East Coast called Roger Williams. They had a joint degree program, so a law degree and a master's in marine affairs. And Rhode Island, the motto of Rhode Island is hope. And so at the time, coming from Hope College and then having this hope motto plastered everywhere, it just felt like I was being called out here. The Ocean State, everything fantastic for sailing. So found my way out to the East Coast and went to Roger Williams and did the joint degree program. You can get a law degree and a master's in marine affairs, which you can't really major in things in law school. So for me, it helped give that check mark of, okay, she does know what she's talking about. She got her master's in marine affairs during the same time as the law degree. So I could come out saying I'm a maritime attorney once I passed the bar, but I wasn't just saying it. I had between the captain's license and the master's in marine affairs to back it up. But it's a fantastic school. Roger Williams is still around. They still have that joint degree program. At the time, it was Tulane was splash and crash, right? It was going to be more litigation, more traditional admiralty law. Roger Williams for me was something that I got to create where I went with it. So at the time, I really wanted to just focus on law of the sea and Arctic law, and was able to find my way down to DC through that interest, and ended up working on a contract at State Department mapping the Arctic. But it just gave me the flexibility being it's a newer school, all things considered. It was only started early 2000s, I think, maybe even 90s. I'm not sure. But yeah, that was it. And fantastic way to enter the career world.
So give us some career highlights before you started your businesses.
Yeah, so I went down to DC. It was a contract position, like I said. So I worked at the State Department. It was on a contract with NOAA and a third party. But it was mapping of the Arctic. It was a contracted position. It was the Extended Continental Shelf Project. And basically, law of the sea, nation states have about 200 nautical miles for a continental shelf. And then beyond that, your extended continental shelf can go up to 350, or based on Article 76 and these different scientific methodologies for claiming it. So I was part of that project, basically, that was trying to compare what the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea says about continental shelves and extended continental shelf, and what the mapping and the bathymetry and the hydrography and kind of all the science stuff, how that all made good arguments to go back to Law of the Sea. We're not an official member, although we have signed, we've never ratified, so we're not an official member of Law of the Sea. There's a distinction there, but we still adopted it as international customary law. It's something that we follow for the most part. We roughly follow it. So that was that. It was about a year contract position. It was a fantastic opportunity. Some really exciting conversations had while I was there. I was in DC for that. And at the time was right around public student loan forgiveness was coming around. Contracted positions, I found out, did not count. So I was getting a government salary, but no benefit for the government service and contract. Was able to, around that same time, the Federal Maritime Commission had an opening for an international affairs attorney in the general counsel's office. So was so happy that was able to get that position and move my way over to the Federal Maritime Commission. Even though I had focused on Arctic law, law of the sea in law school, part of that master's in marine affairs and just general law training was shipping, ocean policy, kind of conferences at the time, moving into alliances now that we know. But it was all of the kind of current things that were happening in supply chain that I was learning, even if it wasn't my Arctic law. And ultimately, what are you going to do with Arctic law? Probably that one job I had in DC. But yeah, it was a fantastic switch. I was able to stay engaged in an international capacity while also both from the global ocean shipping perspective, but also that State Department being the international office of the U.S., having been part of the U.S. government delegation for maritime bilaterals and multilaterals. That was that role that I had at the FMC. So I got to interface with Department of Transportation quite a bit, their MARAD office, Maritime Administration, their international affairs people, and then also Department of State from the maritime perspective. Really just fantastic opportunities that they say, seize the opportunities as they come along. That was fun. And then I loved that work, had such a great time in DC. My then boyfriend, now husband, was always working up here in New England, and his Irish Catholic family was always saying, you got to move up north to have the family. At the time I said, we'll take it into consideration, but turns out we moved up north and went and got a job at the Port of Boston and had a really great experience being able to turn all of that regulatory helicopter experience knowledge that I had into boots on the dock, what it looked like. It was an operating port, so I got to see what detention demurrage looked like from a drayage provider, motor carrier, truckers coming in and out, how all of it interfaced together. It really has led to the perfect combination that during COVID, I was really missing that national, international conversation that I had down in DC, even though I was living up here, that virtual meetings became a thing. Virtual clients became a thing that I thought I have something to say. There's a few people out there who aren't really getting it accurate on what the FMC does or what the regulations are. So I thought there's room for another voice here. And that's where I started my company.
Yep. And I will also say that as supply chain, the expectations from the supply chains has gotten higher and higher. We've seen the need for improvement in final mile just seemed popped up and became a whole business. We never even said final mile until that was courier services or something else a decade ago. But it seemed as if COVID obviously was, an inflection point in that development. But now the expectations are much higher. I can say this as a receiver of ocean freight, mostly like in the 90s or in 2000s. And I remember zero expectations for that. Oh, it's coming from Japan or China or Europe. It will get here when it gets here. Don't bother me. I remember talking to people and they'd say, Joe, don't come back here until next week. I'm like, because I worked in the automotive, and I remember the supply guys would even say, your stuff's on a boat, a slow boat from China. That's an old saying. And now, if some port is problem, we're going to move it to another port. And I think the bars has risen. So we say, okay, I don't care if Panama Canal is closed. I don't care if the Suez Canal has problems. I don't care. Get my freight to this port, clear it, and get it to that warehouse. I don't care. No excuses. And I think the end customers, us, we're all very spoiled. You're like, why are the socks I ordered yesterday not on my feet yet?
Exactly, right? Yeah, Amazon really changed the game for that 2-day delivery where it just became automatic.
But it also became the Amazon effect everywhere. So everybody is an Amazon customer, and then they go to work and go, wait a sec, I'm moving mobile phones. Why don't I have that up-to-date information?
Yeah. And I think we're going to see, not to tangent too much here, but I think we're going to see a lot of a lot more demand for the increased visibility. I think we're going to see track and trace, and we're going to see standards come out that previously weren't necessarily needed. And efforts like the Digital Container Shipping Association, I think, is something that really people need to pay attention to. They have track and trace, they have electronic bills of lading, I think, is another one. They just had some great, fantastic advances in the past few weeks there, where they actually were able to move a shipment on an EBL successfully. I think that's it. We need the same way email works, right? Is we need that to work so that all the data means the same thing. So I think standards is going to be a big one.
I also think, and we don't say it too much, but I think we're going to have smart containers before long. And we're going to have that expectation that I can look at my freight while anytime I want, anytime it gets opened, even if it's being opened like a can opener on the side. I was just talking to guys, and I forget the name of the company, but Bloodhound, and they can detect humans inside a container. They can detect fentanyl inside a container. And I just think the digital is, of course, we want to know where it's at, but we're going to say, well, I want to know the temperature. I want to know everything about it. If it got dropped, I want to know when and how.
Yeah. Tive is another one of those solutions providers where they just created a new unit. Yeah, where the new unit where it has like a probe on it. So for liquids, you can actually put it inside, which if you're shipping things fresh, not frozen, so reefer, but not so that they're still in a fresh state, you need to know the temperature swings because that can completely degrade your product. And solutions like Tive, I think, are right there. Yeah, I think and COVID created the accelerated demand for this because you went from the vessel gets here when it gets here, right? It's not going to go any faster to it doesn't really matter when the vessel gets here. I'm being charged $20 million for my container sitting there. So I just need to know when it gets here. And it changes the game when it became more than just a line item on a P&L.
Before we get into these policy-driven changes in the ocean shipping world, I want to talk briefly, just a minute or two, about OSRA. I'll just say Ocean Shipping Reform Act, OSRA 2022, which I have a whole interview I did with you back in 2022. I'll put a link to that in the show notes, along with a link to your website and your LinkedIn profile and everything else you give me. So during COVID, we had problems. People were being charged detention and demurrage for containers they couldn't pick up. So every day you're like, cha-ching, and you're like, I can't get it. Like the port won't let me in. It's buried under 70 other containers. And companies were going crazy. And we had such demand for all the goods we were buying. Detention is what?
So detention and demurrage, right? It's basically the storage fee for your goods. And so detention is the storage fee inside the box. So when you're using the box, it's the rent to use the actual container shipping box. Whereas demurrage is the space it takes up on the yard. And these are overly simplistic, right? Because the actual true definition that you will be using as a shipper will be likely contained in your service contract or probably negotiated. And remember, I'm a lawyer, everything's negotiable. Everything can be negotiated.
Well, yeah. And when we talk about detention and demurrage, if you're Walmart, you say, we negotiated a better deal than Joe is going to get if he's ordering one container.
And usually that means free time, right? So you get a certain number of free days where you can the box can sit on the yard, it gets offloaded off the vessel, it sits on the yard, that's demurrage. You can get 4 free days before you then start getting charged an incentive fee, basically is what it is. That's what the FMC said. It's to incentivize you to move your goods. This is a transit zone, not a warehouse, right? This is the yard. It's supposed to be just like you drop the box, you come pick it up, you get it out of here. The same kind of principle on the box itself, right? You have a certain number of days to take it off the yard, go to the warehouse, unpack it, fill it if you need to, and then bring it back.
So I always think of it as demurrage is renting the space there, and I got to be out by a certain day, right?
Yep, exactly. Yep. It's a parking spot.
And the detention is just the box. You paid for the box for this much time. Anything over, you're going to get fined. And sometimes the fines go up by the day. So you have some free days, then some small fines, then bigger fines. And anyway, there was some abuses during COVID, by the way. And when you say abuses, I always think the people are probably working their butts off over there. But people were finding out I owe a fortune in demurrage and detention, and I could not pick it up. It's not my fault. And why am I being charged for something? So the government got involved and did this Ocean Shipping Reform Act of 2022. In a nutshell, what is that? Give me in a bullet point.
Yes, not taking it too far back, but the FMC, the Federal Maritime Commission, gets its authority from the Shipping Act of 1984. And so Ocean Shipping Reform Act is a reformation, a reforming of that original Shipping Act. So basically, it's changing some of the core authorities of the FMC. And one of those authorities was they wanted the FMC to be diving deeper on detention demurrage, getting a little bit more of a handle on it. And one of the main tenets that came out was a call for rulemaking. Congress told the FMC, hey, you have to do a rulemaking on detention demurrage, because prior to OSRA 22, it was the Wild West. You could have I like to say, you could have a bar napkin that said $3,000 on it that said containers. And then you could slide it across the bar, give it to somebody and say, that's your demurrage charge. Okay, what containers? Like what's
Right.
the time period? What's this 3,000 based on? They're like, you got to pay it. And like, little do you know, that might have gone to 3 different people and maybe other people paid it already. There was just this, and it wasn't always like that, but there was there was a possibility for this kind of chaos to happen. And so what the FMC did, and they actually were already doing this under Commissioner Dye prior to Congress saying, what's a good idea doing a detention demurrage rulemaking? Commissioner Dye was sitting there looking at her already created rulemaking for D and was like, yeah, I think so too. She had already been starting it. But that was one of the things. Charge complaints, a faster, easier, they almost call it traffic court way of challenging charges that you think might have come through if you didn't like the detention or demurrage. But it wasn't enough to take it to a full lawsuit, hiring all these attorneys. You could do a shorter version of that's called charge complaint. That was created under OSRA. There were a few other kind of
It's just making it better.
exactly, yeah, trying to create some control or some management. I don't even want to say control, management or guardrails around this industry.
And I think when we think about the Federal Maritime Commission at the ports and the DOT for the Department of Transportation for all the roads, what we're all trying to do here is facilitate trade. And if there becomes a bottleneck to trade, that what was going on at the port during COVID, they're going to try and figure it out, try and clear a way. Because the last thing we want to do is say, oh, this became a very difficult country to ship to.
And they were being asked to. And actually, OSRA itself was initially started because of exporter concerns. So the trouble was we had a lot of imports coming in, but the exporters weren't able to get their goods into those boxes on the way out because they were just trying to turn and burn, get your goods out of that, get your imports out of that, because we were all buying stuff, furniture or whatever from China coming in, and then they were emptying it and just putting it on the next vessel back because they were getting such crazy freight rates,
Yeah,
$20,000.
so they're shipping mostly empty. And by the way, they're still shipping mostly empty back to Asia.
And so that was it, was they were trying to balance that out and make it a little bit more fair. And so now you can't just outright deny exports. You have to have it part of your export strategy. And that's something that the FMC is also having a hand in.
Yep. So today's topic, again, is U.S. Maritime Modernization, policy-driven changes in ocean shipping. And before we hit the record button, and we were talking about some of the changes that the Trump administration is bringing. And in case you didn't hear, there was this tariff. So we saw tariffs, and really, the only one that really mattered in my mind was the tariff on China, because that was the only one that was serious. The other ones were all negotiated, and I think they're going to come up with a deal with China. But I think there's been there's been a lot of decoupling from China over the last decade anyway. Virtually everyone I talk to who's a procurement person says we are China plus one. So I'm buying this part from China, but I'm also developing a relationship with another company in India or Vietnam or Mexico or Idaho. And so we've been doing this for a while. And I believe that the Trump administration is saying faster. You will disengage faster from China. And some of it, I think, is, again, I described China as a frenemy. We obviously do business together. They're one of our top trading partners. But if there is a war over Taiwan, we don't want our supply chains in the in China. Hopefully, we can avoid that war completely and keep doing business with China. But I do believe, regardless of what happens going forward, we want a better handle on certain supply chains. And I will just tick them off here. Pharma, we want to be able to say we have a lot of this stuff here. I believe automotive is going to be considered a critical, shipbuilding, which we'll get into in just a minute. I think electronics, anything related to energy infrastructure, I think is going to be here. Anything related to our security, I think is going to be more likely to be encouraged strongly through government to get it back here. So enough of my blather. Want your 2 cents on it?
I think it's really interesting, and I went through similar but not the same. When we moved into our house, there were 2 flagpoles, and I thought, "Okay, let's buy an American flag to put up on that flagpole, and then we'll figure out what we wanna put as second." I'll let you know we put up a Notre Dame flag as the second flag. We had to have Fighting Irish, but on the first one, I went to Amazon and was like, "Alright, let me go buy an American flag." And so I see $15 flag for a 4 foot by 6 foot, and then I see a $45 flag for a 4 foot by 6 foot. The difference was made in America truly or made in China. I can tell by the shipper. And I think it might have said there might have been some fake illusion that it was made in the USA, but like you knew that it wasn't. And I think even the comments called it out and said, this is not made. So I was stuck with that same idea of, all right, so do I buy an American flag from China? It's cheaper. Or do I buy an American flag from the USA? I paid the 40, $45 at the time, but I think that it wasn't, if I didn't have kind of that principal idea, I probably would have gone with the $15, right? We certainly do that all the time with our clothes. It doesn't really matter where they're from. We just buy them because it's either the
Oh God, I
cheaper.
have daughters and they always say, I'm not buying fast fashion because it's bad for the environment.
But that's it too. So like you have to have a reason
This
to
is a
not.
rich person. This is a rich person discussion, really. Your grandparents or great grandparents would not have that discussion. They might have been very patriotic. They would just go, it's cheaper.
Yeah,
Like,
well,
I'm
and I
trying to
think
feed
that's where
kids
we're
here.
at. But that's where we're at, where I think that now that we were saying policy-driven behavioral change, and I think that's where we're at, is now there's this intention to a company is gonna have that same thing in front of them. They're gonna see the cost per unit of a warehouse out of China, and then they're gonna see a cost per unit out of a warehouse somewhere else, and it's going to most likely, most of the time, going to be cheaper coming out of China. But now, because of these tariffs, and this is the theory here, this is the intention, they're equaling that. So that way, unfortunately for now, it just everything gets more expensive, right? Because the alternative still stays expensive, but now you got the tariff to even it out or maybe even makes it more expensive. So it becomes this, now I'm going to find the cheaper option, which isn't China because of that tariff. And so I think what we're also going to see is there are some commodities that we maybe have to still import and likely maybe even still have to import from China in the short term. And so as we find these tariff trade deals with China, I think we're going to see probably some exceptions or maybe some termed exceptions where we will allow a reduced tariff rate on China imported goods for the next 5 years. Because if we were to shut it off now, it wouldn't be sustainable. Our society might not have that commodity. So I think we're going to see that. And that's where those policy decisions, while they hurt in the short term, and right, Trump kept saying that through the spring, it's gonna hurt at first, and then it's going to be right. You're gonna get sick of winning, I think is what he said. So so I think that's what we're seeing is we're in that restructuring of how we do business as a country. Because it seems like he's running this country as a business right now, and so he's restructuring the business trade deals that we have, so that way we can start building infrastructure. And where I guess I'm going with all this is, it seems like the infrastructure has been targeted for maritime.
Yeah, yeah, among others. And I think when I say with decoupling from China, it's not just a security thing. It's not just a national thing. Their costs are higher. So their labor costs are higher than Mexico, higher than a lot of places. They're in a demographic collapse in China. They urbanized, and when people move to big cities, they don't have as many children. And then they had the one child policy. And it's the fastest aging country in history, according to Peter Zion. And now there's people saying that they might have overestimated their population by hundreds of millions. It's for sure 100 million. But that's one of the challenges with a sprawling country that doesn't have a good count on their people. So they've always said we're 1.4 billion people. It's not. It's 1. And we also don't know how many people they lost during COVID, but it was a lot more than most places. But anyway, getting back to it, we are decoupling. And again, my hope for everybody in the world is there's no war and that we remain on good terms with China. I want good things for everybody. The good news about the last generation of us doing business with China is 500 million people who were in desperate poverty are now no longer in desperate poverty in China. It's also provided cheap goods for us. Just so much. Doesn't feel like it today, but overall, if it wasn't for ocean shipping, our lives would have much less stuff in it.
Well, 90% of everything, right? 90% of everything moves by ocean shipping, and arguably most of that is coming from China.
Yep. Anyway, so when I think about it, before we hit the record button, I was talking to you about this. I was Googling this last week or so, just what percentage of goods at Costco are imported. And I think it's 30-some%. And then what percent is imported from China? I think it's 10-15%. And so some of those supply chains, let's just say, make it up, a light bulb. Maybe Costco is buying light bulbs from China and they say, this has been the deal we've had for the last 20 years. We're very happy with it, but okay, there's a higher tariff. Not going to buy it there, but turns out we can buy it from Mexico or from India, and we're going to keep selling light bulbs. And that's no real repositioning of supply chains. There was capacity elsewhere, no big deal. I think a lot with automotive parts are built everywhere in the world, not just China. So it's not necessarily opening up a brand new factory. There's going to be some of that, though, where we say, okay, we have to open a brand new greenfield somewhere in the United States or Mexico. That's a decade, but I don't think that's the majority of what we're talking about. I think most of it is going to be there's capacity elsewhere, therefore we'll go get it. The longer term thing, though, I talked to you before we hit the record button about this. We have a huge deficit here in this country, and each one of us theoretically owes like over $100,000 in back taxes or whatever. That I think the administration's thoughts, and again, this isn't a political podcast. The thought is, rather than everybody paying 30% more, we're going to try and grow the economy. I hope it works for all of our sakes. Right? I cheer for all the presidents because I want good things to happen here. But
you were saying too, so like owning our own businesses here, it's a little bit like, okay, yes, you have to cut costs in some respects. If the parallel is he's running this country like a business, you have to cut costs where you can, but then you also have to find new product lines, right? Or find new ways of make money. And I think and it's a million different things all happening at once, right? If I can't tell you how many times I've heard it's 4D chess. There's this is happening over here while this is happening over there.
We like to think it's all 4D chess. It is the government still.
I think that it's really fascinating to watch, and I do think that it's a recreation of some industries that we've lost through the years. And I think we talk about just a financial deficit as a country, but also a trade deficit. And I think there's going to be opportunities for importers to still stay importing, but you have to find the justification, the rationale. If we were to be 100% USA of whatever the import is, do you still have a rationale for existence? Is there still something that you're importing from a certain area that's not something that the U.S. can or will be making itself? And that's going to be your competitive edge on how you stay relevant and in existence as an importer. And for exporters, I think that you're going to see a lot of policy changes that support the behavior of increased exports, because he keeps saying that he wants that trade balance back.
Yep. I'm not so sure I care about the trade balance myself personally, but I do care that there's good paying jobs. I joke about it, that the government has a manufacturing fetish. They love the idea of good paying manufacturing jobs. There are a lot of people who come out of school who don't want to go to the college route, who want to go work somewhere and make a good living. for generations, we had that opportunity here. It's not, and I think we're still going to require some education. I think the idea of everybody going to college and getting that $100,000 expense isn't going to be the future. I think we're going to say we have a whole bunch of technicians that are able to go in and run factories with automation. I was an automotive guy for many years. I say it all the time. When I started in automotive, people working on the line were getting, every day would be getting dirty, getting tired, getting hurt on those jobs. It was very difficult work. Over time, we got it to the point where it's like very automated. Nobody's going home beat up now after working in a production facility. It's just very different. And I think those are the kind of jobs we're hoping to come home. But that's just not going to be like 1,000 guys working at a factory anymore. It's going to be 100.
Yeah, and it's not even just factory work. I think that it's certainly trade schools, but also the maritime academies. I think that they're fantastic schools, and they give you careers of adventure going out to sea. And you can always come ashore later, and you still get that 4-year degree, but then you also get the opportunity to be out there in the ocean, in the open ocean, which is fantastic. And we just haven't had a lot of focus on kind of the otherwise American pie, go to college, right? Live that American dream college experience. But
I think people are going to start looking at college differently because, I just daughters
I think
went
they
through
already
college.
are. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think they already
the
are.
idea that you send your kid off to college and you go, oh yeah, they're taking a whole bunch of English classes. They did that for 12 years in K through 12, and now they're getting history classes and all these liberal art classes, and then their business courses or then their engineering courses, and you're like, not necessary. You're ripping us off, and we all know it. Anyway, I want to talk to you before we wrap this bad boy up. I want to talk to you about shipbuilding. So one of the Trump policy-driven changes is we're going to build more ships in the United States. Please talk about that.
Yeah, so I think that we were talking a little bit before we press record here too. I think I see it as a three-legged stool. So right now we just went through a real big push for shipbuilding. And so what that means is we used to be a very competitive shipbuilding nation, and we've let that slide. Now most of our shipbuilding is done for military purposes, but even then we sometimes outsource and reflag or modify it to be ready
What
for.
does reflag mean?
So reflag, it's on the commercial sense. So if you want to be a U.S. flag vessel, you have to be U.S. built, U.S. manned, U.S. crewed, and U.S. owned. That's part of the Jones Act. And so you can be reflagged into U.S. service, but you have to go through some kind of waiver provisions. And otherwise, the flag that you might have had otherwise would be a foreign flag, which might be Panama flag, or it might be Marshall Islands, or another flag of convenience, or just a general other flag that's out there. And so flagging is this pseudo ownership over the vessel. And so then the vessel ownership's not exactly the word, but the vessel has to abide by the rules of that country that the vessel is flagged in. And so what happens with the flag of convenience is some of the flags might be a little less stringent than other flags. U.S. is notably one of the more stringent flags, but also along with that is better working conditions, better labor conditions, better requirements on the vessel that might make it a little bit more expensive, but you get those good things that go along with all the higher safety, that sort of thing. Whereas that's something that the FMC, the Federal Maritime Commission, is looking into, is flag convenience as a potential undermining or some sort of unfavorable shipping conditions created by flags of convenience. That's actually an open comment period right now. It's open until, I believe it's August, where they're looking for feedback. Do you think that open flag convenience have undermined the ability for supply chains to move freely and have this fairness to them? But yeah, so I see shipbuilding is the first thing, which if we need to activate our forces, right? If we need to get everybody mobile, if we find ourselves in some sort of international conflict and we need vessels and we need to create more vessels, right now we're pretty slow at creating those vessels. And so we don't have the ability to sea lift, right? We don't have the ability to get our fleet up and going. And we certainly don't really have enough commercial vessels to then be turned into a ready reserve fleet or an activated fleet. And that's part of what MARAD does, is they maintain this commercial fleet that can then be ready if needed to go into support vessels for military conflict. What do we need? We need more shipbuilding because we need to make more military vessels just for readiness purposes and that control over your own equipment. But then also we need commercial shipbuilding, which creates more kind of reliability control, more in-houseness to ocean shipping, global
Hopefully
ocean
some
shipping.
innovation and cost savings and then all the
Exactly,
stuff that
yeah.
comes with competition. So right now, I don't know if it's a policy yet, but there was going to be a fee for ships coming to the US that were not US ships. Please talk about that.
Yeah, so that was part of USTR Section 301. What USTR was looking at was China built versus non-China built, and China owned and operated versus non-China owned and
Because
operated.
they're the biggest shipbuilder right now.
Exactly, yeah, far outweighing everybody else out there. And there's other shipbuilding company or countries, Korea being one of our kind of partner countries that we work with quite often. But what they wanted to do was try to knock down, and I also saw it as death by 1,000 cuts. This is just one of the ways that we were leveraging negotiating with China. But one of the ways was trying to reduce their book of orders. And so we even had US flags that had Chinese books, Chinese vessels on order. So it wasn't just the big ocean carriers that did, it was everybody. And so what USTR did with the first swipe was get everybody all worked up, right? Because that's what happened with $1 million per voyage port fees, which was going to potentially cost a China company, China owner, China vessel. And it wasn't really clear if a China vessel in your fleet counted or if it was just the actual vessel that called. They modified that, they reduced it. And so now it is still proposal, but it looks like it's going to go into effect. USTR actually just called for another proposed modification that closes early July on bulk vessels, I believe it was. But they're honing in on how long do you need to reposition your fleet. And they're speaking to the large ocean carriers so that you can get your China-built vessels out of calling of the U.S. and get your other vessels into calling the U.S. And they won't get that such strong of a fee if they get their China-built vessels out of service, which has reduced the book.
So was there going to be a fee for if I brought a China-built China-built ship into port? And I heard originally it was $3 million, which seems a little excessive. What is that going? What's going on with that now?
Yeah, so that's the one that's being modified. Basically, what's happening is the ocean carriers, as I understand it, are repositioning their fleet in this downed imports time. And just we've seen that over the past few months with all the trade talk. We've seen a lesser number of imports coming through. I think during that time, the ocean carriers have been repositioning their fleet. So they're trying to put either vessels into their U.S. subsidiary, because quite a few of these global ocean shippers or carriers have a U.S. subsidiary company as well. So APL, Maritime Limited. So that's one way because you get a waiver on those fees if you can ship on a U.S. company vessel. And then the other thing is, if as long as you get your China vessels off of those U.S. port calls, you're not going to have as severe of penalties. And so that's part of it is it's all just anybody but China is what the intention here is. You get a lesser fee. And then they also maxed it at 5 calls per vessel, get the fee. And then on that 6th vessel call, if that vessel comes in and it's still a China built, right, that's all you have on the fleet, the rotation, after 6, you're not going to get charged that fee anymore. And it's incrementally increasing as time goes on because they understand, right, you need a runway. You can't just flip the switch and everything changes.
So this is just creating lots of incentives to move that shipbuilding back here. And again, I think there's a lot of people who, when we talk about NAFTA, I'm here in the Midwest and you are from the Midwest. We heard a lot of people say NAFTA was just taking away all those manufacturing jobs and moving them overseas. In a lot of ways, a lot of the discussion now is let's make incentives to get the manufacturing back here. So supply chains are going to be shorter, more local. Anyway, I know I'm going to lose you in a few minutes. So let me summarize what we're talking about. Then I want your final thoughts on the topic. So I'm talking to my friend Lauren Beagen. We're talking about the U.S. Maritime Modernization, policy-driven changes in ocean shipping. And we talked about OSRA 2022. Again, I'll put a link to the episode I did with Lauren in 2022. That was just the changes around detention, demurrage, and a whole bunch of other related stuff driven by COVID. We had some challenges at COVID. Hopefully these things grease the skids a little bit. They make those ports a little better. We talked also about the Trump administration has goals, which is bring shipbuilding back here, bring other critical parts of the economy back here. And you said it, it's first off, let's make sure it's not built in China, but but ideally built here, secondarily built somewhere other than China, last but not least in China. And that is somewhat related to security. But I think there's also, let's build our economy here. We had incentives for a long time to outsource. Now there's incentives to bring it all home. And we also talked about repositioning supply chains. We talk about repositioning supply chains. Some of it's easy, where you say there's capacity in Mexico. So I stopped using the guys in China, there's capacity in Mexico. Others is going to be hard, where we say we're building a manufacturing plant in Kentucky or Ohio, and it's going to take infrastructure, and it's going to make sure feasibility studies and workforce development, and the factory building is probably the easy part. Those are longer term things. And what else did we talk about? I think that was it. Anyway, put a big old bow on this one, Lauren Beagen. Final thoughts on the topic.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, we've been talking a lot about this administration and some of their priorities, but the biggest thing is, every 4 to 8 years, we have administration changes. And so the trick is finding the themes of the administration. They're certainly not often are they maritime focused or supply chain focused. They certainly are now. And so I think that's the biggest thing is find the theme, find people who are really close to the conversation, find people who are really keyed in to the changes here. Because once you find those themes and you can understand the nuance, you can figure out where you fit into that to continue whatever your business is in the new administration. It's not always going to be, like I said off the outset, not always going to be something that will impact you or affect you. And so that theme following isn't always as crucial. Right now, supply chain, maritime, this is all part of it, right? It's affecting everything that we're doing. And it's so important to navigate all of this by watching it closely, listening to podcasts, right? This is a fantastic podcast to find out what's happening with everything that's going on, but truly to find out everything that's going on so that you can catch those nuances, so that you can stay relevant within the theme. Like I said, this is the theme of this administration. I think that we're seeing some core structural changes within the country happening, the economy, but also you can survive it by staying right along with finding out what the end goals are, modifying your message so that you can be in line with that.
I love it. I love it. And by the way, regardless of administration now, the last couple of presidents have said we are decoupling supply chains from China for different reasons. I think we were also, under the Biden administration, there was a lot of talk about sustainability and net zero. Those aren't necessarily going away. They're still important. It's funny, you don't hear it as much, but our customers are still asking. We might not hear our politicians say it as much, but you're definitely hearing our customers say it.
Yeah. And from COVID, I would just add, from COVID, diversification of ports of entry, diversification of supply chains is going to be the name of the game, because all your eggs in one basket is a thing of the past. And now, in order to survive and stay nimble, diversification is the way to go.
Yep. Lauren, it's always a pleasure. I'll make sure I put a link to your podcast, a link to Maritime Professor, and a link to Squall Strategies. I'll put those all in the show notes. And thank you so much for taking the time. It's always great to talk to you. You are a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the ports and the oceans and the supply chains.
Thank you so much for having me on today, Joe. It's always fun to chat with you and catch up.
Yep. Thank you so much. And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward. You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.